Steve, it's been a while. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, mate. It's been a while because you've all been sick, haven't you? You're all sick. You're all sickos up there on that North Island.
No, I'm fine, but the rest of the family, they've got this chronic gastroenteritis or something. And my computer suddenly died about 10 days ago, so I finally got a new one and got it sorted out. In fact, this is the first time that we're recording on this new computer. So
Very good.
if it doesn't sound great, then you'll know why.
It's good. So not only the family was sick, that your IT was sick as well and all gave up on you.
Yeah, it must be something in the water.
I reckon so, mate. I reckon so.
How's it going with you?
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you. Chugging along as usual. No major dramas.
Yeah. Talking of dramas, there was a video we came across, about 40 years old, 1985, when we were on the Charybdis together. This thing was about, is it HMS Newcastle?
Yeah.
Undergoing the enjoyment of Portland and FOST, the Thursday War.
Yes.
I have to say in advance, for myself, I won't just talk about the Navy. I'm also going to bring in my time in teaching, because there's something that both of them do that has long been a bugbear with me, but I'll get to that shortly.
So FOST was the Flag Officer Sea Training, and the Flag Officer Sea Training worked out of Portland, and it's basically where your warships, when they came out of major refit or were first commissioned to go and do things like BOSTs or COSTs. A BOST was a basic operational sea training, I think, and COST was a continuation of operational sea training. So before you deployed anywhere, you had to make sure that the ship was up to fighting speed, up to the right sort of standards, and you were put through your paces during a period of time. Now, I can't remember how long these were, but there are a number of weeks, weren't they, that you'd go through these things?
6.
Was it 6 weeks? And
I only know that because I watched the video.
all right. And it was Monday through to flipping Saturday, so it screwed your weekends. You could never get away. It used to really annoy me, because you always want to get away early doors, wouldn't you, on a Friday, so that you could jump on the train and be home in the pub by whatever o'clock before last orders at 10 o'clock on Friday night. And it just screwed everything. Just from a leave perspective, it screwed you.
It depends how much you were in attuned with the Andrew, how much you regretted leaving the ship.
Well, that was you, Mark, wasn't it? I mean,
the door was still banging when I was off the ship. I was gone quicker than most.
The hatch, Mark, the hatch.
Yes. A strange thing about it, though, you said Portland. They're no longer at Portland. They moved sometime in the 90s. It's now based at Whale Island, Pompey.
Are they really?
Yeah, because Portland was sold off. It's literally no more for the Navy.
Is it not?
No, which is a shame.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare. But
anyway.
that's okay. I mean, because I hated going to Portland. I really hated it. People used to go, I get into Weymouth, great run ashore and all the rest of it. And I used to think, no, it's crap. I hated it. It was nowhere near as good as Guz, Plymouth or Pompey. Nowhere near Portsmouth. Nowhere near as good, in my humble opinion. My apologies to anybody who's listening who was a Weymouth brethren. No, I didn't like it.
Okay. Weymouth was all right. They had a good music scene there in the pubs.
Oh, they may well have done. You know, the only thing that I can really remember, show what an idiot I am, the only thing that I can really remember about Portland is there was a greasy spoon, and it used to do these huge mega burgers, and one of the burgers was called an Arnold Schwarzenegger burger, and back in the 80s, and it was a monster burger. And so you'd rock up at this greasy spoon. I don't know what it was called. I think it was called the Greasy Spoon, actually. And you'd rock up there to fill your face full of these Rambo burgers or Arnie burgers before you went back on board.
And if you ever did a deck pizza, you could say, I'll be back.
Yeah, that's the lovely stuff, baby.
There's a couple of quotes I got from the first part of this video, and it's guys talking to the camera. And they said, pain in the backside. This is Portland. Toughest test of professional skill anywhere in the world, and remorseless pressure. And in effect, what it was an artificial way of making you tired and seeing how you would respond. But I've got to say, for whatever reason, I don't remember much. I've got one memory, but it's got nothing to do with what they showed you on this video.
Really? So what's your memory?
To get there, I don't know how many I did in the end. I deployed to the Gulf in 82, 83, 84, 85 and 86. 5. But I don't think I did 5 FOSTs. Did we do one before we went out the Gulf on the Charybdis?
If I remember rightly, now I'm a little bit sketchy here, but if I remember rightly, you would always go to Portland before you deployed operationally. You weren't going to do a BOST, you weren't going to do a COST, but you would do a pre-operational deployment, which would involve the Thursday War. So you'd rock up there while the other ships that were involved in BOSTs or COSTs were going through their stuff, and you'd join them for a workup for at least a week before you actually then deployed. And part of that was to just get you up to operational speed for heading out to our Miller Patrol, which was the Gulf deployment or anything like that. And I can remember that incredibly well because
you wrote it down in your diary.
Not just because I wrote it down in my diary, but because the day that I joined the Charybdis was a Sunday, and the next day we deployed to the Gulf. So I literally came straight out of basic training, joined the ship. Next day we went straight to Portland, where I was thrown into the forbidden deep end, big time.
Welcome to the Navy.
Because I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. I didn't know one side of the ship from the other. And we ended up being thrown into this whole Thursday War scenario and all the rest of it.
Well, my one memory was, and I don't know what ship it was on or which of the possibly 4 or 5 I did. I'd have been unlucky if I'd got that many. But anyway, I did some damage to my... Hang on, I'll drop my notes. Got my notes here,
That's
Steve.
very, very professional, Mark.
Yeah, apart from the background noise. I did some damage to my right foot, and it's still dodgy 40 years later.
Is it?
Yeah, the mess. And you used to put down, the back of the seat used to go up to make the middle bunk.
Yep.
Well, there was this really rigid, wire that they kind of covered in some kind of soft plastic. But if you kicked out your foot, you could do some serious damage. And I think I hyperextended one of my toes. And ever since, it's been quite weak. I don't know because the whole foot was damaged, I think. So I traced up to see the MA, the medical assistant, and he wouldn't even take off the steaming bat. He said, "No, you're all right." And then I had to go back, and I was in agony for one of those, and that's all I remember. Everything else has been seared out, but that was seared in. I'm assuming you remember quite a lot.
No, not really. I remember a few bits. Just going back to your little incident there, though, I'm surprised that when you got to the medical room there, that they didn't offer you Solprin, soluble aspirin. Do you remember? You'd get these little forbidden tubes of soluble aspirin. It didn't matter what you went up there. My arm's hanging off. Yeah, we'll give you some Solprin. And you'd get soluble aspirin for everything. Yeah, we'll give you some Solprin. Solprin, mate, Solprin.
No, remember the bloody tablets we had to take for anti-malaria?
Oh, yeah, we had loads of those, didn't we?
They tasted rancid. Yeah, was it quinine or something?
Yeah, they had all of these horrible forbidden tablets. They're probably horribly carcinogenic and cause you all sorts of problems. We had to fill ourselves with those things, didn't we? We also had to take them for biological warfare as well. Do you remember the ones that we had to take when Saddam Hussein and the Ayatollah were kicking off with each other and there was a potential threat of chemical release? We had to take these other little tablets which were to protect you in the event that we came under chemical attack. And I'm thinking, I don't think that's going to protect me. It's probably going to give me long-term problems later on in life.
Yeah. Didn't they give us bromide?
Yeah, you used to stick bromide in the tea, didn't they?
I reckon
they did.
And that was designed to what? Was it fry your knackers?
Suppress your flipping rampant sexuality, mate. That's what it was.
That didn't work.
Yeah, good luck with that. Doing that with Jack. You've got no hope.
Yeah. This video, 3 or 4 points I'd like to bring up. I don't think a lot of what they showed on this video affected us. It couldn't have done. Because I never went to shore for Operation Awkward. And in this video, at the end, they were talking about the whole ship got involved with something on the top of Portland Bill. I never did. Well, certainly...
Mark.
Not that I remember.
Were you ever really in the Royal Navy?
Why is it I don't remember any of this? Either it was so awful, I blanked it out.
That's why.
Or I got a terrible... It's not important, I don't remember it.
No, it was probably so awful you blanked it out. That's probably what it is. There was a lot of it that was quite awful. Yeah, I don't think everybody went and did the whole run ashore thing. But I do think that perhaps a lot of what you did may not have been BOSTs or COSTs. They may well have just been a pre-operational deployment down to Portland. Because you didn't...
Elucidate my memory. What's the difference?
So, now, if I've remembered this correct, a basic operational sea training was the BOST. And that's... if you were on a ship that was just commissioned I'm presuming that that's what Newcastle would have been doing, that she went through that basic one, which covers all of the bases. And then a continuation is one that you'd do either if they've been recommissioned, I think, and then you'd do the one that I talked about where you'd do a pre-deployment workup, which would normally be a week, pretty sure it's only a week, including a Thursday war, and then you'd go and deploy. If you were really lucky, you could go through your naval career without ever doing a BOST, without ever doing a COST, but if you deployed, you would always do the Thursday wars down in Portland, which would be like a highlights reel of the nasty thing. But somebody will be able to correct me. My memory's not as good as it used to be.
I mean, this video was done in the summer, and it looks beautiful weather. I think it was Southern TV or something who did it. In the 70s, I watched Sailor on the Ark Royal, and that made me want to join the Navy. And this would have been something similar for kids in the 80s.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think they over-embellish a lot of things for effect. There was one guy, let us be honest, if you are a government and you've got one of the best neighbours at the time under your wing, you're going to make sure before you send these guys out to conflict zone, which is what the Gulf was, you're going to make sure they're ready. And I understand the need for professionalism. I understand the need for that. I fully support it. But there was a guy, I won't say who he was was high up. He said, I write reports. I might affect future careers. And it's like, okay, what's this for then? Is it to try and trip people up, or is it to actually lift them up? And all I could think of going through the video was that this was a way of tripping people up. And it reminded me of another governmental oversight force called Ofsted for education. Now, I was in the Navy 8 years. I was 20 years in teaching, of which it was split almost equal in the UK and here in New Zealand. New Zealand has ERO, the Education Review Office. And you've got people parachuted in this case, the ship, or it could be a school, and they'll come in and they give the lie that, oh, they're doing it for us. They're wanting to improve our effectiveness or our ability to teach. You only have to look at Ofsted right now and the criticisms it's being thrown at in the recent 2-3 years. I think there was a head teacher in the UK committed suicide over a bad report, which I'm going to talk about later. And it just reminded me of this officiousness, this jumping hoops, and made worse if, and I think it was, I don't know his name, I recognise the voice, the voiceover.
It was John Humphreys, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, John Humphreys. He said, if the ship's company seems to be coping too successfully, then they will put extra pressure on. They'll even pull out people so that they make mistakes. And I wrote down here, well, then it's punishing professionalism. However good you are, that's not what they want.
Yes, that's exactly what they did. And that's exactly what they do. All of the institutions that I've worked in, so I've obviously been institutionalised longer than you were, Mark. Not necessarily in that sort of institution, but I've certainly been institutionalised a lot longer than you were. And I think everything that I've been involved in whatever the institution was, they have put the pressure on you, they have squeezed you till you pop, and then they put a bit more pressure on you. And it's never been to gently grow you and to develop you, but it's just to see how much you can absorb. All the time, everything that I can think back on over the years, particularly before I sort of moved out of the constant operational sphere and moved into more of a management position. Everything was just pressure. And it wasn't because you needed to be put under pressure. It was just to see how you coped under pressure. It didn't make you a better operator in many regards, in terms of your trade craft or in terms of the way that you did things. It just showed that you were somebody who could absorb a lot of pressure. And I think that that's the thing with the military. That's what they do, isn't it? Policing is exactly the same, and other departments that I've worked in were exactly the same. They just keep squeezing you until they can't get anything more out of you. And then they go, yeah, that's good enough. And you're left like a snotty heap in the middle of nowhere. I divert a little bit from the Royal Navy, but some of the stuff that I went away and did in terms of training to get me up to a certain standard in the particular areas of work, after many months of training, I was almost gaga in the way that I could function. So I was sent to do a particular language, and when I was learning through this language, after the intense sort of brainwashing of the language, I couldn't write in English. I was mixing all of my letters up in English because it was constant from sort of 8 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. Everywhere you went, everywhere you went. And it's the same in some of the other stuff that I've worked in, you know, they put you under constant pressure. Portland, bearing in mind it's 40 years ago, I wonder what it's like today, actually. I wonder if it's a bit more genteel or whether it's a bit more rounded in terms of what they try and draw out of people. But back in the day when we were in, mate, it was a cosh. You were just beaten.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's the best way to train people up, but it served a purpose, I suppose.
Well, again, another semi-quote, because these people on the Newcastle and, of course, ourselves on our ships were exposed and criticised, because the quote is, it was the only way to achieve the right standard. In the military, they get away with it because you can't say anything. But if you do that in other industries, there's enough evidence to show that doesn't work.
Yeah.
You're not debriefed, you're told. And I'm not criticising the Navy here, because you get to a standard of leadership that's quite competitive, or certainly when we was in, so I don't judge people to have gone through the ladder and have no capability. But I'm going to talk about that when it comes to teaching in a moment.
You're right. It's a hierarchical system, isn't it? So it's going to be top down. This is probably the reason why you and I didn't do a 22-year career in the Royal Navy, because
they wouldn't let me.
Because we're not wired in quite the same way. And even though I've been institutionalised for 40 years in terms of what I used to do, I always worked on the weird side of the institution, which was that side of the institution that people didn't really get or understand. So I was never in the mainstream of it. I was always on the fringes of it, which suited me. When you're sat in a warship in the middle of the ocean running here, running there, jumping up and down, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, you do have to kowtow, you have to toe the line. This is one of the reasons why I never progressed and got my commission. So I was recommended for commission, doing that upper yardman scheme. I went to the Admiralty Board and called the Commodore a fascist, and it didn't go down for me very well. So you know, you don't talk to rank like that, and you don't make comments about rank like that. And that was my career finished in terms of my aspirations. Even that, though, is quite interesting, because it was at Portland on the workup before deploying. And this would have been, it would have been one of the Gulf patrols that I did, but it wasn't on the Charybdis, it should have been on HMS Manchester. I'd met at the Savo. The Savo was the senior aviation officer at Portland, and he was on the FOST staff. And I'd met him probably a year before, when I'd got papers in for the upper yardman, which was for the commission. And he wished me all the best because he knew that I was going to go flying. That's what I wanted to do. So he wished me all the very best. Anyway, before deploying a year or so later, he turns up on the bridge and he sees me and he goes, he says, how are you going? How are things going with you? So I remember you. And I thought, oh gosh, do you? The amount of people that they see come through. But this chap remembered me. And I said, well, actually, I've put my notice in, I'm leaving. And he said, why? I said, because I haven't been able to get the traction that I needed to get to do the flying aptitudes as quickly as I needed. I haven't been able to get off the good ship. And he said, leave it with me. And I sort of looked at him. He went and saw the captain. And he came back up to me and he said, if I can get you to Biggin Hill tomorrow, would you take your notice out? I went, yeah. And he said, right. And so we went back into Portland and I got shipped off and I went to Biggin Hill and I did my flying aptitudes at Biggin Hill, which I passed. Came back absolutely made up that I passed flying aptitudes. Then I deployed, did my sort of 5-6 month deployment, came back to the Admiralty interview at Salton, I think it was, and did my 3 days there. Did fine on the general leadership and all the rest of it. But it was when I had finished the interview, I got given a real hard time at the interview. And it was when I came out of the interview that the senior rate, the petty officer who was looking after me, takes me back in and says, how did the interview go? I said, mate, what a nightmare. And he said, well, what was the problem? I said, the Commodore, what a fascist. He gave me such a hard time. And he went, don't worry about that, mate. That's what they do to in-service candidates. Don't worry about that. Anyway, he goes and tells the Commodore what I'd said. So
yeah, I just thinking that.
So of course I go in to get my result, and I march into this empty room with a solitary chair in the middle of timber floors, big desk at the back. My backside hadn't even touched the chair. And the Commodore says, by the way, I'm not a fascist. This has not gone in your favour. And that was it. And he said he never wanted to see me back at the board. And I went, oh, yeah, oh, well, that's that then, isn't it? So,
yeah. So it doesn't matter how good you were.
Didn't matter that I'd passed my flying aptitudes. Didn't matter that I'd done all the stuff at Biggin Hill. Didn't matter that a senior aviation officer had recognised me and kept me in sight. Didn't matter that there was some sort of strings pulled to get me off the ship. I made a comment that did not suit the hierarchy. And there we go.
Yeah.
Such is life.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because I did the same in Mercury as well when I did an okie dokie to the fleet chief or the warrant officer. And as soon as I did that, he went ballistic, apparently, when I walked out. He was telling me about something, and I said, okie dokie, sir. And I turned around and left the office. And he's like, okie dokie? Who does he think he is? He should have said aye, aye, sir. And from that point onwards, he tried to get me kicked off the course, which was so sweet. Because not only did he not get me kicked off the course, I was the top qualifier on the course. And he had to present me with the award, which was yes. Yes. But anyway, okie dokie. But I digress. Yeah. Sorry.
No. Well, apart from the fact that you annoy most people you come across in the past, I fully appreciate that. I said I was going to flick over to teaching. I've got to be careful now. Somebody could triangulate. Ofsted comes in, and it's my first Ofsted. So just give some background. I went to university when I was 33. So when I was quite a mature student, and my first job was a head of department. We took a Cinderella department, and when I left the UK, it was the biggest uptake, but that doesn't matter. In my first year, we had Ofsted coming in. Just happened to be that cycle every 4 or 5 years, and they came in. And all I saw was the effect it had on the school, which was not good. It was effectively trying to prove to Ofsted how good they were. And it was all make-believe. You know, when the Queen or the King now goes around visiting places, they must have this perpetual smell of paint. So this is what's happening with the school. Because I was new, I had done my postgrad, and I was asked, look, it's unusual, but do you mind taking on student teachers to put them through the course like I did the year before? Because they were struggling to get enough schools to commit to doing it. So yeah. And I put through about 8 teachers in the end. Part of the Ofsted, a pre-visit came down with one of the highest people that can do any inspectors independently of Ofsted in the country. And this person had a vendetta against the person who was running the postgrads and ruined her. I was told in advance this is going to happen, and I watched it and I thought, you're not coming here to improve the school or the departments. You're just after somebody that you've had a long-standing running. That's got to have an effect on the way things are done, and you can't just be in teaching. It's got to be possibly in the military as well. I'm assuming you would have come across stuff like that.
Yeah. So much of it is because it's all linked into a hierarchical system. While I understand the value of hierarchy and I understand that people sit in different positions, what I took away from my time in the traditional armed forces and the traditional policing that I started in, that is not the best way, in my opinion, to get the best out of people. So rather than I'm the boss, do what I tell you to do, I've always tried to work on a very flat servant leadership, a very altruistic type of leadership. And that was instilled in me, and we've mentioned this before, by Sub-Lieutenant John Murphy, who was a divisional officer for us on the Cribidus.
Cribidus, yeah.
Because of something that he said to me when I was 16 years old, when he told me to go and do something, I refused to do it. And he said, I will never ask you to do something that I have not done or that I would not be willing to do myself. And I thought to myself, that's the type of leader that I'll actually listen to. Somebody who has earned their spurs, somebody who has gone through the same thing that I've gone through. And I've never forgotten that man. And what he instilled in a young 16-year-old kid was what really sort of set my pathway into the way that I led and my style of leadership, which is bring everything to the table. I might sit at the head of the table as the boss, but everybody else sits in different positions around the table, but I'm not higher. But I might be across from them because of the position that I hold. That doesn't make me higher than. It makes me sitting in a different position with a different responsibility. And so I always try to bring a real flat level to the leadership and to try and engage as many people as possible to build them up. And I think when these inspections come through, what they do, like you say, they're looking to prove how good you are as a school, as an organisation, as a ship or whatever. Well, actually, if you're doing what you should be doing anyway, you're going to prove how good you are because the standards that you are setting for yourself and the team are just going to be part of your norm. And so anybody that's going to come in is just going to look at it and go, oh, that's pretty cool. Problem is there's always an agenda, I think, with these inspections.
Yeah.
From what I've seen anyway, they've always got to make a mark. You can't score that highly. And I've had this when I've done these reviews on things. I'd score something and say, no, we need to bring that down a mark or two. You go, well, but that's not right. Yeah, but we can't have that scoring like that because it's going to push this up or it's going to push that down. You go, well, that's not honest, is it?
I can't speak about the Navy, but I know in teaching they wanted a certain amount of failures.
Yeah.
But with this video of the Newcastle suffering through FOST, they only give 1 to 7 grades. And it goes from unacceptable to very good. Never excellent. No one can get excellent, obviously. So surely there's something suspect about that then. How can you ever leave there saying you've done a fantastic job? They would never recognise it. And what has really got my goat, that this video reminded me of, it's the problem that has infected the English language and certainly teaching. Is at what point in time did the word satisfactory come to mean not good enough? And in fact, I've got a quote here from a thing called The Writer. This was written back in 2012, bear in mind, and it's on about education. And it says, Ofsted wants to change schools' satisfactory rating to requires improvement. It's no longer enough for a school to be just good enough. And the writer says, Satisfactory means different things in different contexts. If you're asked to make a sandwich and you make a sandwich, you've performed that task in a satisfactory manner. If you're asked to cook a banquet for the Queen, King now, and you do that, well, then you've obviously performed that task in a satisfactory way too. Changing the words feels like a pointless box-ticking exercise. And this is why I've mentioned it, because I think this is a wonderful sentence. If the government really wants to see an improvement, shouldn't they change their expectations instead? I don't quite get how you would ever set a benchmark of 7 things, but you only get to a certain height. And then, but as I said at the very beginning, pulling people out so they don't get to that height. Well, what's it all about then? Why would you do that to a crew or a school for their morale? And we know, as I've already said, a head teacher ended their life because of it. Just bizarre, and it's definitely hoop-jumping paperwork.
Bureaucracy, mate. Every institution riddled with bureaucracy, riddled with paperwork, riddled with all of these number crunching things and stats that you've got to perform. And it's the same in every single institution. The thing, I was talking to somebody today and we were talking about how the speed of communication and media and information is so far ahead of institutions these days. Most of the problem that Western nations are struggling with is their institutions are archaic in comparison to the information flow because they're not nimble enough. The institution isn't nimble enough to keep up with the information flow. And so they can't control the information flow. And so they can't control the information flow. They've got to censor it and suppress it because it's the only way, it's the only dial that they've got that they can turn up and down that can actually slow things down sufficiently enough for the archaic institution to try and catch up to the point that it needs to be. And I think this is what we're struggling with. We have got top-down, top-heavy institutions across all of the governments, all of the armed forces. In a world which is very nimble, they ain't. I mean, this is why with the work that I used to do, we would work in very small teams of people. We would have very clear reporting lines, which were pretty flat, and we would respond very quickly. We were like a QRF, a quick reaction force. And that's because all of the bureaucratic BS had got out of the way.
Yeah, they call it workflow now, don't they?
Yeah.
What's your workflow?
Yeah.
Corporate bingo.
Lean Six Sigma or something. That's another way of processing. Anyway, so I think that the Navy and the Army and the Air Force, I'd be really interested to know what it's like now. But for a modern sailor or a modern airman modern sailor in our experience, to have a look at that video of Newcastle and to just say, wow, that was what it was like 40 years ago. And today it's no better, or it's very different, or they do things differently. But fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't know, mate. Yeah. It was not fun, Portland.
Do you remember ever receiving a debrief?
Yeah, because we used to get marked all the time. You'd get scored. So everything that you did, you'd have one of these FOST staff over your shoulder. So if you were going out there and you were receiving a signal by flashing light, you'd have one of the chief yeoman or whatever he was, or a leading hand or whoever, there watching you and how you recorded it and what you did. If you were sending tactical comms, if you were in the MCO, the main communications office, doing stuff, you would have somebody breathing down your neck, grading you, and then they would report back, and then you would get a new backside ripped for you because you hadn't done this, and the yeoman then gets in trouble, and he gets in trouble for not supervising or not providing enough training. He then beats up the leading hand who's clearly not doing the training on the job well enough, who then comes down the mess and beats you up, type of thing, you know? There was always debriefs like that.
I don't remember.
And there was always a report as well that was done that graded the ship as a whole. And then if you were satisfactory and above, great. But I think more than anything, and again I might be wrong here, it would have been the careers of the commissioned officers that would have been determined more so than the ratings.
Yeah, I got that distinct impression. Yeah. There's a scene towards the end, I think it's a petty officer, who has a go at FOST because he said, I was told to turn something off, and then rover, whatever it was, then to turn something back on. What am I supposed to do? Because he was criticised. He said I was following orders. And you could hear them backtracking, oh, yes, well, and some very implausible excuse that was being put out there. And I thought, yeah, this is the problem. And I don't necessarily think it's for anyone below petty officer, really. If as a leading hand you got told off, I don't think that's going to stop you going up the ranks. I've never heard of anybody like that. If I only knew one person in three ships, how many ships I served on, Steve?
I don't know, mate.
In the 3 ships I served on, I think I only ever came across one guy who'd been demoted. We
did indeed, bless him. Yeah, we did.
So it does happen, but I don't think it was linked with FOST. I think it was more to do with your behaviour ashore or whatever on the ship.
Yeah.
It serves a purpose, but to what purpose and for who? Moot point.
Yeah, I think primarily for the senior rates and for the commissioned officers, and particularly for the captain, because if the captain was looking to try and get flag rank, then he had to impress the admiral or the rear admiral or whoever would have been in charge of the FOST team, and he'd have had to suck up. What he wouldn't have done was he wouldn't have referred to the Commodore as a fascist.
But now there's the thing. You know, in history, they say that the war is always fought by generals fighting the previous war. Now, some of these senior ranks who are doing these assessments, I wonder how often they've been out in the war zone at the time that they were assessing, or now. Because, as you say, technology is changing so much. What are you assessing, and to what level? If you have not been in a war zone in a couple of years, I wonder if that's how often that's been talked about.
Yeah. It was a good memory though, watching that Portland thing, and because
beautiful looking ship.
Oh, look, Type 42s, mate. I mean, I served on 2 of those, and I really, really enjoyed the Type 42s. Those sleek grey warriors of death. They were beautiful ships. HMS Manchester and HMS Southampton were my 2, and I thoroughly enjoyed them. They were really nice ships, handled nice, did what they should do. Great crew, and yeah, really good fun. So it brought back some really nice memories for me, particularly as an ex-5th Destroyer Squadron man.
Well, thanks for flicking us the link, and we'll put the link with the video.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Those want to watch it.
Somebody might pick it up. Very good.
Thank you,
very good, Simon. Slip and proceed.
Yes, bye-bye
now.
Toodle pip.